So hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us for this special live session. I'm Itzik Amiel, and here we are with another weekly Switch interview series, as we call it, Switch It On, where we talk to smart and talented people about how can you switch your own practice and even your life. And you are invited to join us. Today, we are going to talk about storytelling as a way to engage with your clients. And please feel free to tap in the chat box who you are, where you're coming from, because we would like to see you are joining us. And we'd like to see the guests see you with us in the room. So please type in, don't be shy, type your name, where you're coming from, so we can share it with all our audience around the world. I have the honor to have this session actually with a true expert and a friend that I know for a long time. And today my special guest is Mark Donnolo. And so before I invite Mark to join us, let me give you some highlights about him, because I don't like to tell people in front of them because they're always being shy. So let me bring him after I tell you some nice words about Mark. So Mark Donnolo is the founder and CEO of Sales Globe, a leading sales innovation firm focused on designing and implementing strategies for revenue growth. Who doesn't want to have revenue growth, right? Mark has decades of hands-on experience helping companies and leaders in a lot of ways how to get more growth in their own practice, their own firm, and their own company. Mark is the author of Quotas, Design Thinking to Solve Your Biggest Sales Challenges, what your CEO needs to know about sales compensation and essential account planning and innovative sale. He holds an MBA from the University of North Carolina and a BFA, so you know what it is, which is an interesting combination, from the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. So without further ado, welcome, Mark, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks. It's great to be here. Great to see you.
So great to see you and get for the time that you're going to dedicate for us. I know it's going to be short and compactful, and I know our audience here is for a real treat because it's very valuable and practical, as I know you, always practical strategies. So if you allow me, let me set the stage for our conversation, because it's not a secret that humans have told stories for centuries, if you want, to communicate with others, for survival, and even to record accounts of the daily life. Well, storytelling methods have come a long way since the day of cave paintings. Is psychological power, I think, actually holds today, and I think we all agree also in our days, years later. And the brain preference, if you look at the brain for a lot of our audience, for stories over pure data stems from the fact that it takes in so much information every day and needs to determine what important to process and remember and what can be really discarded.
Right.
Storytelling really plays a role in uniting people and brands, as we're going to probably see today. Audience are more likely to engage with messages and resonate with them, and of course trigger an emotional response to them. And therefore, I think storytelling helps drive stronger, deeper connections with your client. Storytelling also play a critical role in brand building, helping the client get to know you and what you're standing for. So there's so many benefits we're ignoring, and I think Mark will talk about it, is also ensure your brand remains front of mind. In fact, I think I found a research that shows that storytelling can help your brand be 22 times more memorable. 22 times more memorable. So how can we ignore such a tool? So this is exactly the reason for this special session with you, Mark, to understand more about the power of storytelling to engage with clients. And how, of course, the professional people listening to us right now can learn to tell stories in a better way. Do you want to add anything on my short introduction, Mark?
No, I think that's a great setup. And in fact, I think it's something that we don't pay enough attention to in business is storytelling. We'll get a little bit into that, but it's the idea that this is something that we have engaged in for 40,000 years, 50,000 years, depending on your worldview, right? So this has been done a long time, but we don't do enough to leverage it in business to really get our message across.
Absolutely. And I think all of us obviously telling stories, sharing stories, but we never did it really intentionally and understand how to craft it in the right way to get the right response or to get benefits out of it and not just tell it for the sake of telling it. I mean, that's, I think, more interesting. So, Mark, I don't know if I told you, but I'm always trying to start the episode what I call 10 in 1, which I'm going to ask 10 questions in 1 minute just to give people overview, a taste. Who's Mark? What do you know about? Because we cannot cover everything you know about in 30 minutes. And I will encourage our audience to join us and type their answer in the chat if they want to. if they hell have time, but definitely listen to Mark respond. So if you're ready, Mark, I'm going to prepare
All
and I'll
right.
attack you with 10 questions in 1 minute. So let's see how you're dealing with it. So here we go. Let me just take that out so it will help us. Here we go. So the first question, Mark, is client engagement via storytelling is innovative strategy, an unknown treasure, or nothing special?
Hmm. Well, I think it's an innovative strategy, and it's a treasure that we know about that not enough people find, not enough people dig up, right? So it's something pretty special if you can find your treasure there.
Awesome. And remember, my question always tricky. Number two, learning to tell stories in the right way. Everybody can. Only people who are born with the skills. Oh, why should you learn how to tell stories?
This is a great one because one thing that we don't like to do is we don't like to tell. I mean, some people like to tell stories, right? Some people are natural storytellers, but most of us don't. Particularly if you're a professional, you tend to be kind of a person who's logic based, maybe right brained, right? Very very logical and stepwise. And the idea of telling a story, we don't want to hear somebody tell a story all the time. We want to, we want to. Oh, sorry. Good Lord.
That's
Sorry
what
about
the
that.
entertaining
We,
part.
we don't want to hear somebody tell a story. We want to kind of get on with it, right? So I think everybody can learn to do it. You have to kind of get out of your own head, and you got to get your head right in order to become a good storyteller, right? So that's something you can learn.
Okay, awesome. I'm gonna go. We have 1 minute, so the next 30 seconds for the next. Number three, the way we tell stories during the centuries has definitely changed. Stories stay the same. Oh, I'm not an historian.
Well, I am a historian, and I think the way we tell stories has probably evolved. I wasn't around 50,000 years ago, at least that I don't remember. So it probably has evolved, but I think a lot of the wiring has stayed the same. I think a lot of what makes us engaged in the story has stayed the same.
Great. Number four is today work for us. Stories can help us to connect better with others. Not always, for sure. Only if you work for Disneyland.
Oh, I mean, it's absolutely can help you connect better with others, and uh, would be fun to
Great.
do it for Disney, though, wouldn't it?
I'm sure they learn to do it very well as well. Does every story told by professionals must have a goal? Sorry, absolutely. I need to think about it. Only in special cases.
Yeah, it's got to have a goal, and that goal is really about what you're trying to solve for, right? So, and we'll talk about how those connection points work, but absolutely a goal. Otherwise, you're going to be one of those people that tells stories that nobody wants to listen to.
Exactly. Absolutely need to have a goal. Number six, for professionals, storytelling can help to engage better with clients, communicate better with clients, or brand themselves.
All of the above.
That's a tricky question. You're not following any of them. Number seven, how can analytics and data support storytelling as the main focus, as a backbone, or don't force me to be sound stupid?
Well, your analytics, your facts are really the supporting cast in your story. So your story is not about the facts. Your story is about the message that you're trying to get across, and the facts or the analytics actually support that, right? So that's the mistake a lot of people make is they put the facts in front, and nobody engages with them.
Exactly. Get boring and then leaving and then stop listening. Number eight, data storytelling is ultimately about understanding context, inspiring change, or taking action.
Well, I think it's all of the above again. I think you've got to know what you're trying to solve for. You've got to know what's going to motivate your audience and get them to act.
Absolutely. Definitely. Otherwise, you're missing part of the point. Number nine, one of the important fundamentals of storytelling is one story for all, a few story for all, or each person with their own story.
Well, I think you have your story that you're going to tell. Well, I mean, you could tell your brand story, right? About who you are, who your company, your business is. But then you can tell your story certainly about what you're trying to solve for your client, right? That's going to be a story. But then if you're going to have different audiences with your client, perhaps there are different people in the organization, you're going to vary that story slightly to connect with that particular audience.
Great answer. Number 10, and the last one. To be successful with storytelling, the best advice is not to try to be a master storyteller, have a patient, or enjoy it as is your hobby?
I think you took the course here. It's like, so, we want to become, I mean, don't we all want to become master storytellers? But the best way to become a master at something is not to try to not try to be a master, right? The best way is to be yourself and find your own style and look at it as a hobby, right? So the more you humble yourself, the better you become at telling stories.
Absolutely. And because you mentioned the course, why don't you just throw here with the first call to action? Because there will be people curious to hearing you right now, want to hear more. What shall
Yeah.
they do right away?
Yeah, so we just released a course with LinkedIn Learning, and it's called Analytics Driven Storytelling. And you can go to the link that's in the chat there, and there, you can see it right there. It is free to LinkedIn Premium members, but it's a little less than an hour on how to engage the primal wiring, how to solve your problem, how to become a better storyteller, and how to start to integrate it into the work that you do. So it's not doing it all at once, but I think it's a really good set of principles for how to start to become much better at it. And you can put it in action right away. It'll start to make a result for you pretty immediately.
Awesome. And we're going to add after that in the chat also the link directly. But I mean, if you miss part of what Mark shared with us, definitely take it and always take it because it will be very much. We cannot cover everything today. So, Mark, that was insight to what you just shared with us. The answer was to the point, and you never felt anything. I tried to trick you. I don't know the material so well, you see. So that brings us to the next part. And the first part, actually, I want to know from you, Mark, and actually the first question that actually fundamental, I think, for making our viewer maybe even stay with us, those you are here with us. And I call all of you there who are joining, and I see you joining, but you're not putting your name where you're from. So do that. Put it in the chat that we can see where you are, where you're coming from, that you're joining us. So here's the question. What is storytelling? Why it's so important and powerful for growing a professional practice?
Well, I've learned this through hard experience over the years. It's like, and kind of cutting to the core of it. It's because in business, and I mentioned this before, we tend to be logical. We tend to be stepwise. We tend to, and particularly in the professions, we tend to try to put things together and give the logic to our client. And so, or maybe if you're into analytics, you might be doing the analytics or the data as well. And there's a certain comfort in that as a business person, certain comfort in the facts or the logic. But the problem is sharing too much of that doesn't get your message across. Sharing too much of it, in fact, might actually confuse your audience. If you're just listing facts or listing reasons why things have to be done, it may not get that message across. So your facts or your analytics are not really the story. So what you want to do is you want to understand what it is that you're trying to solve in terms of the problem, right? So this is really what it's all based on, is the creative problem solving that goes behind the answer that you're putting together for your client in this case. And I tell a story on the course, the LinkedIn Learning course, about a job I had. Actually, it's a job interview I had in New York many years ago, back in the 80s. I was a designer and I was trying to get a job, and how that job interview just failed because they looked at my portfolio and I wasn't solving the problem. I wasn't, coming up with strong concept. I was kind of doing the things that you would expect. And we fall into that trap in business as well. So that really changed fundamentally how I think about problem solving and how I think about storytelling, because storytelling is a very important part of your problem solving. So the power of it, and we mentioned this a little bit before, the power of it is that you're taking your left brain logic and you're combining that together with a little bit of right brain creativity, and you're supercharging that by engaging the primal wiring that we've had for thousands of years as humans, right? And so if I can tell a good story and I can get my information in that story, I can engage my client, I can engage my listener, and it's going to become more memorable and it's going to motivate them toward action.
Awesome. And I see people joining us, Max. I just want to mention a few names of Trisha from Atlanta, Gail from Woodstock, Gil from Israel, David, Alexander, Rajesh, Marisa, all of you that not putting your name, you missing. You can brand yourself easily and the whole world could see you. But at least start with that. Don't be embarrassed to share who you are. And if you have questions for Mark, by the way, put it also in the chat because I want to ask your question to Mark today, not only mine. So, Mark, so thanks for that. And I think we can ready. So those who are joining us now, you're invited. We are talking with Mark Donnolo about storytelling to engage your client. So we understand, and I think everybody understands the importance of storytelling and a little bit you share with us. And if I hear you between the line, you're actually referring to what we all have to work on. I don't know, our mindset.
Yeah.
So what do you need to think about when you tell a story in terms of mindset?
Well, it's not about your information.
Mhm.
It's not about your data. It's not about the facts. Um, a lot of it starts with you. As we say in the South, is about getting your head right, right? So what you have to do is think about how you think. And how we think can hold us back from becoming better communicators. So if I think, well, I'm a data guy, or I'm a facts guy, or I'm a business, woman, or I mean, and I think of myself in a certain way, right? And I'm a factual person. Sometimes that can hold me back from being able to connect to become a better storyteller. So what you have to do is you have to start getting comfortable with that idea, and you have to start to practice that a bit. So first thing you have to do is you have to address your fears, because some of the fears are fears of what we experience with storytelling. So you're in a meeting and a person starts telling a story and you're like, oh man, and it never ends, right? Or what's the point of this? And then I get the same approach avoidance when I try to tell a story then. So if I start to tell a story to you, it's like, and I'm not comfortable with that, I feel like you're waiting for me to get to the end of that story. It's like, just get to the information, right? So because we're so immediate, we want to see results right away. We want to hear information right away. We don't have the patience to do that. So first thing you have to do is you have to get your mind frame set to say, okay, I am going to take that leap. And that leap is very risky, because if I'm giving you a presentation on some facts, I can keep going through that and I can defend it. And if you have questions, I can defend it. But once I start into a story about the facts and what that means to the audience, I can't back out of that. So it's a little scary. So you've got to get your head right in terms of getting comfortable with that. And that just takes practice to start to get there. Then it can be about the information that you want to get across.
I think if you correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, is also, there's a lot of noise on our own heads. When somebody tells you a story, I think your brain right away looking for other stories similar from your own life, and you start getting associated, etc. So how do you make that noise being quiet and being present, listen to somebody else's story without thinking about your stories you have in your head that similar to that story?
Well, I don't know how you control how somebody else is going to think, other than to engage them on something that's meaningful to them. In fact, what you're saying, if they're thinking about other things that are similar, I would argue that could be more powerful, because they're starting to make comparisons with what you're saying to their own experiences, right? And that starts to connect them more to your message. What you don't want them to do is you don't want them to get too far off track. So your story is probably going to be relatively brief and engaging, because we know that once you start speaking to somebody, the attention over time starts to decline pretty quickly, right? So we don't want to drag it out too far, and we want to hit a few key points in that story to keep them involved.
And that's exactly my expertise, right? The attention switch is exactly, if you don't give attention, people will notice you don't listen to the stories. So in order the story be complete, you have to, there's a storyteller, as you said, but also how do you call the other person? The story listener, or the one who, because story to tell to yourself to the mirror, it's a story, but what the value in it. Right? So there's two
Yep.
people, and the recipient has to be impressed in order the story to be impactful, important, and connect the people together. I
Yes,
like what you
exactly.
just said. By the way, again, thanks for more people: Gil, Claudius, Thomas, Sydney, Jose, Stephen from Atlanta, and Jose from Jones Creek. All of you, thank you very much for joining. And if you have questions for Mark, please put it in the chat, because otherwise I'll continue having fun and asking my questions. So if you have a question for Mark, put it in the chat. I'll ask your question to Mark. So with that in mind, Mark, and I want to continue our chat. And again, if you're interested in more about my Mark and his work, and I see people signing it, you can go to Mark's website, definitely, and I'll recommend very much, because there's so much more material that we can cover. And here it is, for those of you who do not know, it's salesglobe.com. And that's the website where you can see more information, more things he writes. I think the website is new, if I'm not mistaken, Mark. A few months old or so, right? Your new website?
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
and again, if you want to go grab the online course of LinkedIn Live, you have premium, you get it for free. If not, it's very little money, but worth every penny of it. I recommend you go to the chat. I'm going to put later on the direct link so you can get it, because you listen to it here. It'll get you direct to the course, and you can get it automatically, and you can hear more from Mark. And I promise you, worth every penny, because you're going to hear more valuable insight for your practice. Now, if you don't want to miss, by the way, any of our weekly Switch On interview series, you follow up on LinkedIn or go to the Switch Up website. You could sign up to all the business development strategies and tips, and you'll be added to the email list where you can register and get reminder about a fantastic guest as Mark of today. So let's continue about the practical topic as we choose for today, storytelling to engage your clients. So let's give us some practical advice, Mark, because we want to, the time is limited and people want to have, they're sitting there, they want to have practical advice. How do you tell storytelling? So how can you structure a story simply to solve a problem or maybe get an action to grow your practice or business?
Yeah, so here's the big challenge that I've always had with storytelling. And I've read a number of books, seen a number of videos on storytelling. And the methods that they give you are correct, but they're too academic and sometimes they can be too complicated. And what it means is that if I'm trying to remember, okay, I have to have my setting and then I have to have my character and then there's going to be the problem and the climax and the resolution and I'm trying to put all these pieces together, it starts to become too mechanical, right? And so that's the last thing you want a story to feel like is like I'm trying to put together this mechanical thing. And so what I get down to is a couple of things. There's really only 4 points you need in a good story to get the message across, right? You need a setting or a current situation. It's kind of like, okay, we were out in the meadow and business was good and things were going really well, but they're not going to go well for very long, right? Because you're going to have this thing called a problem that comes along. And the problem is usually the issue that you're talking with your client about. And the problem is what we think of as a challenge question. So we want to do some work around really defining that problem clearly, but that problem changes things. And that's the thing you want to emphasize in your story. And then it goes to a point that we call a climax. And the reason the climax is important is when you say, Mr. Client, if you don't solve this problem, it's going to eventually lead to this situation. And that climax can become a motivator for change. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's very important, is to have that motivation to change. So I want to have that climax about what might happen. And then I want to have my resolution. So 4 points: where we are now or where we were, what we ran into in terms of a problem, where that's going to lead to if we don't fix it, and then what my answer or what my solution is. So very basic structure. But you have to emphasize that you've got to solve for defining that challenge question really clearly. So that's the thing that's really important to the client, because that's eventually going to be the motivator for change.
And I love the point you just mentioned, because I saw a lot of professionals tell stories, or maybe they learn somewhere, but instead of telling stories, focusing on the challenge of the client,
yes,
they tell stories about the services. And that's becoming really ugly pitch that nobody wants to listen to.
Right. And think also about stories that you've had with prior clients as you're talking to new clients or current clients, because those are stories as well. And if you look back on them, you can find those 4 components in them as well. And if you can tell a compelling story about the impact that you've been able to have by your solution, then that's going to be much more powerful also.
Exactly, because people love to talk about themselves. So you focus on their problem, they will be all ears, as we said, right? They will listen to you. They will listen with like a sponge. You want to observe and learn everything that you could solve the challenges. So love it. I mean, it's such a simple tips and powerful as in storytelling art. So again, I mean, I'm looking for questions for people. If not, I'm continuing with that. So I'm sorry, Mark. I have a lot of questions for you. So my next question for you, we add for you, specifically for our viewers who are interested to get better in storytelling. So you know what? You convince them they want to do better. So how can you become better at storyteller? What would be a very fast tip for the people listening to us?
Well, in short, it's what's the best way to get to Carnegie Hall? It's practice, practice, practice. But let me be really practical about that. So I think one of the challenges that we run into as professionals is we spend all of our time putting together our deck, our presentation, and then we don't spend enough time actually telling the story about that. So as you're going to put your story together, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're test driving that. And what I like to do is I like to engage the outsider. That's somebody who maybe doesn't know about the details of the situation, but they understand the context, they understand the content in general. And that person can give you a good critique on your story, right? So they're going to be able to give you a fresh perspective, which is very valuable. But then you've got to test drive your story in kind of a low risk situation. So before you go in front of your client or a big presentation, I would test drive the story with somebody who is actually a lot safer to test that off out with. So it's kind of a low risk ramp. And then what I would also do is maybe get some coaching. So getting a speaking coach, or I mean, if you're really into it, I love the idea of local theaters, local acting classes, where you can actually do that with an acting coach, because really telling a story is a bit about acting as well. And then probably the last thing I would say is you want to be your authentic self. So look for role models who are good storytellers. See if you can pick up some tips about how they do it well. But you've got to be yourself in the end, right? So don't try to be somebody else, but try to pick up some techniques. And as you said earlier in the opening, look at it as a hobby. You've got to humble yourself when you're telling a story, right? You don't want to be a audacious, bold, crazy storyteller. Maybe that's your personality, but you want to have humility, and you want to be yourself. So look at it as a hobby. Don't look at it as I'm trying to become a master, I'm trying to become an expert, but it's something that I do and I work on over time, and I'm eventually going to get there. I'm going to become much better. So you've got to be kind to yourself, and you've got to allow yourself to just evolve in terms of your style as a storyteller.
Great. And just to remark, one, you gave us a clue who you are, Mark, because those you do not know what BFA is standing for. I mean, before you become powerful salesperson and teacher and author, you also studying arts, right? You were in a theater,
Right.
if I remember. So that makes you very unique in that, in understanding the storytelling.
Well, unique enough that I couldn't get my first job out of business school because I was the art guy. Nobody wanted to hire the art guy, but we figured that out over time.
And I think, lawyers, imagine lawyers studying theater before becoming a lawyer. It can be so much more powerful in ability to connect.
Yeah, you learn a lot. It's a great learning.
Absolutely. And the second thing I think may be interesting to say is the way you think about storytelling. You talk about coaching, because the fact that the other people who are better storyteller, instead of you figuring it out, ask them. That's the shortcut, the best way to learn and learn how to tell your stories. And I think the fact that you said that everybody has their own story, for my own life, I could tell you that I knew there's a lot of stories, but I knew I cannot capture all of them. I would not remember all of them. So what I used to do is I have a little, white card at home, an index, and every time I have a story, I would just write myself the fact in bullet points.
Yes.
And I tell myself, I don't know when I need to use it. And I can tell you now, years after, I'm using a lot of those stories, and I learned to tell them. And every time I tell them, it's almost like the first time I'm telling them. But if you don't capture them, right, the mark, you will not remember, although it's your stories, because your life is full of surprises. So better you capture it, maybe, and that's what will help you out to craft it later on, right?
That's a great point. Collect stories along the way. So you've got a couple different angles there. One is stories that you can collect that you can use later because you'll find some similarity or lesson in those stories that will support what you're trying to communicate. And then the other, of course, what we've been talking about is how to use my information to create a story specifically for my client. But collecting stories is a great practice, through life, because we forget about those things, and they're very valuable.
Yeah, and it's also good for yourself. Not only for publishing it, but also for yourself to read once in a while your stories. Oh yeah, I've been through that as well. Awesome. I see the audience is not engaged. You don't ask your question. They allow me to do all the work by myself. I'm happy about it. They're listening at least, and they are with us. So you probably are engaging everybody. I want to summarize this great session with you, Mark, and share a quote from the River Collins, who said, "Storytelling is among the oldest forms of communication. Storytelling is the commonality of all human beings in all places, in all times." And I want to add on it that it is actually the time to learn and use them properly and intentionally. Don't leave your stories there to die with you. Keep them alive by sharing it, by learning, by crafting them. And guess what? You're going to get so many, as Mark shared with us, so many amazing benefits for your business, for your life. And it will be much more engaging with your clients, for sure. So thanks for that, Mark. Again, I recall to everybody else, it's time first for all of you to take action. Capture your stories, start learning, and maybe coaching, learn to crafting it. And more than that, I would suggest very much you go grab Mark Donnolo LinkedIn course. It's for free for premium members, so why you have nothing to lose. It's very short, compactable. You're going to learn so much more and see what beautiful things Mark has to share with us. Those of you just joining now, I've been here with Mark Donnolo. He's a true sales innovation expert and CEO of Story Globe. And again, you can learn about him on his website, salesglobe.com, or grab the course. And we're going to put the link right away after the show on the bottom line in the comments, so you can grab it there right away. So look at it and check it out, and I promise you'll enjoy. And of course, connect with Mark on LinkedIn, and that's the best thing you can do, because he will be approachable and a very nice guy, I promise you, in your life. So I think that's the best compliment I can give you, Mark. So because I know you. So for now, I want to thank you, Mark. You've been fantastic having you here. The time passed very fast. So 30 minutes elapsed. Thank you very, very much for that.
Yeah, always great talking to you. Thank you. And thanks everybody for joining us. I appreciate it.
And Mark and myself want to thank each one of you indeed that joined us. We're fantastic. You've been here. You took your time, and I hope you learned something today. So thank you for that. Remember, next Tuesday, 6 p.m. CET time, 12 p.m. Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific time. This was the first time we did it Wednesday, just because of me. But it's time to switch on your storytelling to engage in better and maybe the right client for your business and maybe even for your life. Bye for now, everybody. Bye, Mark. Thanks a lot.
Bye, Itzik.